Good evening. I would like to call this organizational meeting of the Board of Education to order. In accordance with the Board of Education's policy, as senior member of the board, I've called it to order for the purpose of electing officers. Pursuant to board policy, I will ask for nominations in a second and a vote for the following positions: chairperson, vice chairperson, and secretary. We will nominate and vote for each position separately and in order. May I have a nomination for chairperson? Robin.
Jill McCammon.
Do I have a second? Any other nominations? Okay. All those in favor of electing Jill McCammon for the position of chair, please indicate by raising your hand. Okay, that is Maroney, Sini, Brown, McCammon, Parent, Nelson. Gady, I can't see you. Oh, I'm sorry, you're there. Okay. All those opposed? Okay. Anyone abstaining? Okay, that's Walsh and Loveland. Okay.
And you don't see Greg Grambling.
He is not in.
He's
there.
not up. Okay.
Okay. Jill McCammon is elected as chair of the. Okay. May I have a nomination for vice or nominations for vice chairperson? John.
Robin Nelson.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Dennis. Okay. Any other nominations? Okay. All those in favor of electing Robin Nelson for the position of vice chair, please indicate that by raising your hand. Okay. That is Maroney, Sini, McCammon, Parent, Nelson. Okay. All those opposed? All those abstaining? That is Walsh, Brown, and Loveland. What is the count, Sarah?
5-3.
Okay, the motion,
503.
the motion passes. Robin Nelson is elected as vice chair for the Board of Education. Congratulations. May I have a nomination for secretary? Dennis.
Sarah Parent.
Okay, is there a second? Robin. Are there any other nominations? Okay. All of those in favor of electing Sarah Parent for the position of secretary, please indicate that by raising your hand. That is Brown, Maroney, Sini, McCammon, Nelson, Parent. All of those opposed? All of those abstaining? Walsh and Loveland. Sarah Parent is elected as secretary for the Board of Education. Congratulations, Sarah. Okay, may I have a motion to adjourn this organizational meeting? That is Dennis, seconded by Dave. All those in favor? That is unanimous.
See you later.
I'm sitting there anymore.
We'll just take a minute to rearrange.
I saw.
Okay, here's my rule. If you bounce too much, I'm gonna get you.
Good luck, Sarah.
Only 354 days every year.
All right. Are we ready? All right. I will call this regular meeting of the Board of Education to order. The next regular Board of Education meeting is on Tuesday, November 26th at 7:30 p.m. in the Board of Education meeting room. With that, we move on to the chairperson's report. Good evening. Thank you all for the honor of chairing this board as we embark on another year of dedicated service to our school district. It is with great pleasure that on behalf of the board, I extend a warm welcome to our newly elected board member, Joanna Walsh. Though you've been a volunteer with the Darien Public Schools for a number of years, Joanna, your fresh perspective as a new board member and commitment to our students will be an invaluable asset to our team. Our sincere thanks to David Brown and Robin Nelson for continuing their service on the board. Their experience and wisdom have been and will continue to be essential in guiding our district towards continued excellence. Thank you both. While we are 9 people with individual ideas and different experiences, we share the care for our schools and our students this role requires. This board has done a lot of work in the 8 years since I first joined. In technology alone, we've implemented and then adapted a one-to-one device plan for our students, watched as Google Classroom fundamentally changed how our students interact with their work, and seen the emergence of AI. We've added department chairs, assistant principals, psychologists, mental health staff, and security personnel. We've expanded our course offerings, adding many courses, including American Sign Language and Mandarin, and expanded opportunities for students to travel abroad. We've expanded our high school cafeteria and supported the build of 1 new elementary school and the renovation of 3 others. At the board table, and this is the boring part to everyone else, we've focused on how we do our work. We looked at creating clearer goals and priorities, focused on collectively creating the agendas that set our work, adjusted our planning timelines, and formalized some of our communication structures. But of course, improving doesn't mean being perfect or that the work is over. As a board, we'll need to continue to highlight all of those areas, work on all of those areas, and underneath it all, on meaningful communication with our community, our staff and administration, and with one another. Our shared vision for this district is to prepare our students today for a changing world tomorrow. This vision is the cornerstone of our work, guiding our decisions and inspiring our actions. Together, we work to ensure our schools are equipped with the resources and support necessary to provide a high-quality education for every child. Tonight, in addition to Dave, Robin, and Joanna, I also thank fellow board members Greg Grambling, Katie Lublin, Dennis Maroney, Sarah Parent, and John Sini. It is a privilege to serve this community, and on behalf of this entire board, we thank all of you for the opportunity. With that, I'll move to public comment.
Good evening. If anyone in person or online would like to participate in public comment, please come up to the podium or use the raised hand icon and wait for the chair to recognize you. Please state your name and address for the record. You will have up to 3 minutes to comment. Please note the time with the chair. There are no raised. Oh,
Good evening.
Yeah.
Jacqueline Sam, Darien High School art teacher. Thank you all who came out last week for our 10th annual UCBC Art Show. It was a fantastic display of K-12 work, and I encourage the entire town and the BO members to go and see it for themselves, the quality of our K-12 visual art. The quality is a result of having fantastic and passionate art teachers. While I greatly respect Dr. Adley, Dr. Fedigan, and the BOE's hard work, I feel like there's a misunderstanding of our elementary schedule, and I can provide some more insight into it as the former department chair. Since 1996, elementary, because that's as far back as I could talk to teachers, elementary students have received 1 hour of art rotation, of art per rotation, totaling 1,800 minutes in a year. In 2020, that was reduced to 45 minutes with an additional 9 rotational classes added to maintain the same total of the instructional time, not extra. Currently, rotational classes are inconsistent, with some schools only receiving 5 sessions and others having 7. And last year, all students received 9 rotational art periods over the year. We were told by the scheduling consultant that we could run last year's art schedule with 1 less FTE. However, we cannot. And as a result, students in these schools are not receiving the same quality art education. My biggest concern with rotational art is that it isn't consistently being taught by a student's regular art teacher. How can we ask teachers to grade students that they only see 5 to 7 times per year? How can these teachers build rapport with students? How can teachers foster a love and passion for the arts with these students? And how can they ensure accommodations for students with disabilities are implemented with fidelity if teachers aren't consistent presence in the classroom? The current schedule for art teachers at the elementary level is challenging, unsustainable, and not in the best interest of our youngest learners. 1 prep period isn't the same when teaching all grade levels across multiple buildings. Teachers cannot prep paint on a Monday for a Thursday's class. Teachers need to load kilns within a day of their project being completed for a bisque fire. Well, these are very specific art teacher problems. It means students can't get their same quality art experience. There's not enough time between classes to clean up and set up for different grade levels and materials. My real life example to you would be to ask you to try to completely clean up from lunch and completely set up for dinner in 3 minutes with 22 people leaving and a new group of 22 people walking in the door, and each person eating a similar but uniquely their own meal. The art teacher is responsible for giving each child a very specific piece of paper with their own work on it for every student in the building. We heard about efficiencies last year with the schedule, and I don't understand how it is efficient to have a teacher traveling back and forth between buildings on the same day. An elementary art teacher in our district has 20 minutes to do the following: clean up her classroom, leave her school, get into her car, drive across town, get to the art classroom to get her cart set up, and then get to the teacher's classroom in that building to teach. Then this process has to be repeated and return the cart and back to her home school for another class, all in those same 20 minutes. How will those children ever have the same time to paint or use clay when they're working on that situation?
Good evening. I'm Brenda McGee. I'm a teacher at Darien High School. So we're going to talk a little bit about how the schedule has impacted the students, the change in the schedule. Work is not being displayed like it used to. Students take pride in their work and they like to show it off to their friends. Students can't create many 3D or clay pieces because of the limited time the elementary teachers are now given to load and unload kilns, set up and clean up for 3D materials. It takes a minimum of 40 minutes to load a kiln. That's a minimum. Usually takes more. And then for that teacher, then that's their prep period and they won't have other time to plan for that day. Students are not working with a wide variety of materials like they have been doing in the past. This also impacts their fine motor development. Students have not received as much instruction time in each trimester as the past years and are not learning or creating as much. Teachers are being forced to make choices and programs have been impacted. You leave teachers asking questions. Do I leave out a clay project because I can't do it on a cart, or do I load a kiln instead of displaying student work around the school? We were promised no impact on current programming with the new schedule, but the elementary students have not had the same experiences as previous years. For the past 4 years, Tokenique had a beautiful Veterans Day art display with artwork made by each student. This year, that couldn't happen. There wasn't enough time for the teacher to prep that project and hang the display work before yesterday's celebration. Morale at the elementary level among the staff is now low. Teachers are leaving. One left last year for a better schedule and to get her own art room, knowing the schedule would put her on a cart. A second left in September. A lateral move to a neighboring district for a better schedule and her own room, and not on a cart. Having a dedicated art teacher at each school is important for the building and for a cohesive community within the school, and for the students especially to feel that cohesion as they walk in and they travel through those 5 years at the elementary school. Our award-winning art high school program will be impacted, even though we will not feel it for a few years. When students get to DHS, they talk about the depth and breadth of the elementary program and middle school program, and will come with knowledge that they've gained from that time. The competencies of the vision of the graduate are taught in all art classes at all levels. The art room is a place where students can authentically use communication, creativity, curiosity, independence, and learn about integrity. As we approach the budget season, we want to remind everyone something Julie Best said last budget season. It doesn't feel good not to have a dedicated art and music teacher for each building. That is what's happened. And in a town like Darien, where we pride ourselves with having a great program, we hope that you'll consider this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to participate? There are no raised. Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay. Thank you so much. My name is Rena Ninen. I come from a warm, happy home here in Darien, Connecticut, if that will suffice for address. I'm here in a very different capacity. For 2 decades, I've been a television journalist. And today I'm coming to advocate for, oh my goodness.
That's okay. Happens to all of us.
Something I truly believe in from the bottom of my heart. I didn't think I'd be so upset, but all of you standing here today are in a remarkable position. Education at a local level has never mattered more than it does in this moment. And as a journalist who's always composed, always asking questions of presidents and secretaries of state, I stand before you today to ask you to consider looking into a study for buses to help us with later start times in our high school. because what weighs on me heavily is the mental health component of our kids. And I think about the potential of what could happen for just one more kid to be affected by this. And I think all of you are in an awesome position of needing to really rethink how we look outside of traditional bounds in education, in funding. And I believe strongly that this is such an important issue. When you look at the statistics from the National Pediatric Center, you look at the statistics from universities and also from high schools across that have done it and transformed it from California to Florida. They have found innovative ways to look at how to fund this. And I just think of the loss of life here in Darien. And I'm the host of a podcast, and we did one on suicide. And that deeply affected me. I did that for Darien. And it went across internationally everywhere. And I just want you to know, all of you have an awesome responsibility with so many things to look at. But I can't advocate enough at what a difference this can for a district. And allowing our kids to have a later start time when they're hormonally, it really makes a difference in giving them that few minutes of sleep in the morning that could be so transformative. And I know I'm ugly crying over this, which I didn't expect or think would happen. But I just really believe that we should find a way to figure out how we can fund and expedite the study. Because the next 4 years, it's not going to matter as in Washington alone. It's going to matter at a local level with what you guys do for education. And I really hope from the bottom of my heart that each one of you here today can make this town the shining star for education. Innovative programs, transformative ways in how we looked at how to fund, how to expedite, and how to cut through red tape. Because nothing matters more than our next generation of Americans. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anybody else who would like to participate? There are no raised hands at this time.
Thank you, everyone, for the comments. With that, I'll move on to the superintendent's report.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome, Joanna. And our teachers have just left, but I would give them a warm welcome too, to Jackie and Brenda. November 5th was a professional learning day, election day in town, but it was a learning day for our staff with a variety of activities. Certainly not exclusive, but inter-reading, play-based learning, restorative practices. We did have a visit even to Great Island. We analysed some student work and did some work on instructional rounds and other action plans. So thank you to Dr. Fedigan for your organisation and for the PDAC team who put that together. One of the most special days of the year I have to share is Veterans Day, and we started to celebrate that around the district, starting on Friday, Monday, and today. I want to just thank our veterans for their presence, their patriotism, their sacrifice, love of country, and for their service. It's a very special time in the elementary schools, middle school and high school for this particular event. So thank you to all those who made that possible. That doesn't come together easily. Staff are involved in that, and it's a big event also for our parents to participate and bring these very meaningful learning experiences to our young people. So again, thank you for their service to our veterans and for their presence in our schools. I had on my list to recognize the K-12 art show. If you don't get a wee chance, stop by the Upper Crust Bakery across in town there, grab a cup of coffee, and the artwork is on full display from kindergarten. In fact, I think there's even a pre-kindergarten students work up there right through AP art. You'll enjoy it. Theatre 308 is doing the Crucible. Ryan, I think that's coming up this weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, this particular weekend. So congratulations and good luck to the cast and crew. We do have Max Sassel, who will be coming to the high school auditorium on November 20th for our parents. Thank you to the various parent groups who are bringing Max to school to talk about social media. Both to our students and also to our parents. So we look forward to that event, and I will be advertising that event at the end of the week. We do have a few board members going to Caps Cave Convention this particular weekend. And then there is a legislative breakfast scheduled for December 6th that ordinarily the board chair, but certainly one or two other board members are welcome to attend that. I don't think we will need, I will certainly check with the board chair after this meeting, but I'm not anticipating the need for a facilities meeting on Friday. But I'll coordinate that with Dennis.
Okay, thank you. Brian, student representative reports.
Firstly, congratulations to Ms. McCammon, Ms. Nelson for the positions of leading this great board. Our students had their PSAT about 2 weeks ago, so hoping for some great scores as those start to come in the coming days. As Dr. Adley said, Theater 308 is having the Crucible on November 14th through 16th, and all those who are able to go, I suggest buying tickets at theater308.org. It's a great show. We have some great students and staff who've worked on it. Our girls field hockey and girls volleyball team have their state semifinals in this week. So hoping the best for them, hoping they can win some hardware. And our boys football team continues to succeed. Hopefully they get another win this weekend, keeping the good win streak going. So best of luck to them. Best of luck to all our sports teams and Theater 308.
Thank you very much. A lot to be excited about. Approval of the minutes. Joanna, you're welcome to either approve or abstain. Either is fine. But may I have a motion to approve the minutes of the regular meeting held on October 22nd? That's John, seconded by Sarah. All those in favor? That's Brown, Maroney, Loveland, Nelson, myself, Sini, Parent. All those opposed? All those abstaining? Joanna Walsh, rather. Board committee reports. I don't know that we'll have much. Sarah.
The curriculum committee met last week, whatever the fourth was, and we discussed K-3 literacy as we always do, and the new courses, which will come to the full board later.
Tonight. Dennis.
And facilities met on Friday, October 25th. We discussed the master study of the high school, Middlesex, and Tokenique, and also included central office in that we thought we should bring to the board, and also just sustainability projects. And we further dove on the capital projects for 26.
Thank you. Alan, you want to touch briefly on communications? Or Marge, maybe, what the communications committee did?
Well, we essentially made all the finding or all the revisions to the communications committee. There were they actually went through in very much detail, looking at the actual strategies and the goals and so on and the feedback. So we have made the respective changes, and we'll be ready to bring it back to the full board for discussion.
Okay. Anything else I missed? Thank you. All right, with that, we'll move on to presentations, discussions, and possible action. Update on pre-K through 8 personal mobile device plan and survey data. Dr. Adley and Mr. McGuire.
Thank you, Mr. McGuire. If you remember last spring, Mr. McGuire presented that part of his work would be to look at the K to 12, actually, at that particular time, cell phone policy. We've done that for the elementary schools and the middle school. And this is a progress report after giving the feedback survey.
Great. Hello, everyone. I'm Tim McGuire, your instructional technology coordinator. I do see a few new faces in case you don't know who I am. And thanks, Dr. Adley. Yes, tonight's presentation is intended to provide an update on those pre-K to grade 8 implementation of the new strategy of our cell phones and smart devices at the elementary and middle school level. And I think I should start by saying, actually, it's going really, really well. And right up front, let's say it now, and I'll say it a few times. We need to thank the parents, the students, the administrators, and especially the faculty for its success. So let's see if my clicker works here. Trying my clicker.
Make sure.
I'm glad it happens to a tech guy.
Yeah, that's what I'm always worried about. Actually, that's what makes me nervous is the presentation and the slideshows don't work. So I'm pressing the clicker here. What do we got? All right, should I just go beep and you can press it for me?
Yep, here, let me see if I can just go that route.
You want me to try from here?
How about
There we
just
go.
do it
Yeah,
this
let's
way?
do that. We'll do it old school. So
You
I'll
just
do
tell me,
that
yeah,
and you
point it
go.
out.
All right. So how about a little context about our presentation this evening? The task was undertaken because it was an action item, as mentioned by Dr. Adley in some instructional technology updates. A board priority goal was set around this. The board received a lot of community interest and from members of the community. We also have an increased awareness of research around student mental health and the impact of social media. And we recognize the potential distraction and split attention of personal devices in the classroom. There is also, we recognize that our guidance, whatever we had developed, needed to be flexible to incoming updates and input from community members. And before I leave this slide, I want to also mention the final bullet point, the work isn't done. There's a group at the high school with about 17 participants that's working on the 9 through 12 guidance. All right, click, all right. Here's what we really want from our pre-K to grade 8 guidance: establishing a culture where within our schools that personal devices are not expected and they're not even the norm. We do provide our K-8 students with devices for learning, so it is not necessary for students to bring their own. In fact, we'd much rather they leave them at home. Our approach is built around trust and a view that our students want to be responsible digital citizens. We did not go with a yonder bag strategy, unlike some other communities that have been adopting those. And if you're not familiar with those, it's a storage device where students arrive to school, they magnetically seal their personal devices in, they carry that bag around all day, and then release it at the end of the day with a magnet. We didn't do that strategy. Our strategy is built on trust. One of the goals of our approach is to partner with the students to step up the new expectations, and as you'll find out, they have. So our policy does require consistent implementation, and I again want to thank the staff for that. And unlike some other districts, our approach is not highly punitive, but does require a partnership with families who support us in this work. So we have opened our ears to feedback, which I'll be sharing some of that shortly. But I also like to say the feedback opportunities will continue, and we do plan on reassessing our approach in the spring. All right. Here's an outline of basically our implementation guidelines in a really succinct slide. The simple statement I can make is that if a student, for whatever reason, in the pre-K to grade 8 level, brings a personal device to school, it must be turned off and stored for the duration of the school day. And success depends, again, on everybody participating in that. All right, you can go to the next slide. So this slide includes data that's been maintained across the 5 elementary schools and the middle school. And that chart you're seeing on the left, I want to be honest with you, that's the worst version of the data I can present to you. Think about that for a moment. So worst version of the data. We have about 1,050 students at the middle school. And as of October 22nd, when I pulled the data, 64 students had their device taken once or possibly twice. So my calculator for compliance did not factor that those students who had a device confiscated on one day were most likely compliant the other 35 days. So of the 77 total confiscations in all, 9 repeat offenders were in grade 8. And 2 were in grade 6. AirPods were confiscated. That's the chart in the lower right. AirPods were confiscated a total of 3 times, and 2 of those times was with a cell phone. So that kind of goes hand in hand, those devices, if you're not familiar with them. Smartwatches are more prevalent in 5th and 6th grade. I did speak in full transparency. I did speak last week with the middle school administrators. We have had 2 8th graders with a 3rd offense, but that's the minority of students. The vast majority of students are highly compliant. So I don't know if you've ever taught middle school or have had a 13-year-old, they can be very frustrating. So I've been there, I know that. So there's a little more detail on the next slide about some data. You can go ahead and go there. These 2 charts are focused on the middle school. The reason I didn't put an elementary chart there is because it was boring. There's 5 elementary schools, and at the elementary level, there were 4 incidents where a device was confiscated across 5 schools in total. The chart was very boring. All those incidents took place in a classroom, by the way. The chart on the left might benefit from a little clarification. We're talking about non-instructional blocks. That's when the students aren't in class, and the majority of that is happening between arrival and first period in the large holding areas like the gymnasium or the cafeteria, right? But this gives you a sense of when the device, if it occurs as an incident, where it occurs. You can go to the next slide. So we did conduct surveys of the students, staff, and parents. Starting with some of the parent feedback, 272 adults responded to our survey. Nearly 80% believe that there has been a positive impact on focus and learning, and nearly 60% believe the changes had a positive impact on our child's overall well-being. Just as important to me is to note the idea that there might be no impact on a change we make. And I think that's okay to say. We'd love to believe everything we do has a positive impact, but I think there's value in saying we've done something that's caused no harm as well. So when somebody says no impact, I think that's an okay thing to say. I'll note that the chart on the left in the red represents 9 adults of the 272 that recorded a negative impact on their child's well-being. But when you dive into their comments, it doesn't necessarily communicate how the child's well-being is negative. It's really they were expressing concerns about safety and communication needs for the family. Slide. Adapting to the change in practice was not difficult for the vast majority of families. 95% of respondents are comfortable with the new practices. Diving a little more deeply into the 13 unhappy responses, the reasoning varied. So for example, 3 thought we didn't go far enough and 3 thought we went too far. 5 respondents thought that we really definitely wanted instant contact with their child during the day. 1 person felt the problem never existed. So you kind of get a sense there is a diversity of perspective on that, right? But to refocus for a moment, of the 272 respondents, that's the minority response. The vast majority responded very positively to this change. Next slide, please. So we do have a lot of feedback on the comments. Again, many parents strongly approve of the policy, viewing it as beneficial for learning and social interaction. And multiple parents expressed gratitude to the district for implementing these guidelines. Several mention it helps them in delaying getting devices for their children. I have a lot more quotes I could showcase. I selected these 2 from the parents because it was representative of the vast majority of respondents. A few parents, as I kind of hinted to, alluded to concerns in their comments about safety or maybe complaints with how they can communicate with their child. But my favorite comment that I read was a parent reporting that from their perspective, more kids were playing outside. You go to the next slide. Now we get to the students, right? So we only surveyed students in grades 5 through 8. We didn't feel it was appropriate to survey the K4s. 847 students chose to respond. Looking at this chart on the right, the vast majority of students perceive no impact. And as I kind of hinted to before, so if you make a change and there's no perceived impact, we've done no harm. I think that's really an okay. On a separate question of self-reported compliance, and keep in mind this was an anonymous survey, most students, that's 95%, reported they are following the guidelines. And other questions related to satisfaction indicate about 40% of students are unhappy with the guidelines, but that means the majority are neutral or positive about it. So we recognize that students use personal devices for a variety of reasons, including socialization. Their responses suggest that the majority of students see no impact on their social interaction as a result of this change. Next slide, please. So I chose 2 slides I created for you with comments from students because there was a diversity of viewpoints and a lot of comments, although to be fair, a lot of students chose not to make a comment. There was kind of a common theme of emerging about wanting Apple Watches and concerns articulated about emergency situations or difficulty communicating with their parents. Again, that wasn't everybody, but the Apple Watch commenters suggested setting the device to school mode, and I want to address that for a moment. To be clear, if you have an Apple Watch and you set it to school mode, there is no way for a staff member to manage or monitor that, nor should they. All right, and it's also really easy for a child to unlock school mode. Comments around the rules being too strict were shared by some. However, there were also students that agreed with the approach. There were a number of comments about students wanting a time during the school day when they could have personal device access in the school. That approach is not supported by the recommendations outlined in the resources we reviewed in the development of this plan for students at the elementary and middle school level. You can go to the next slide. There were comments of frustration, but there were lots of thorough and thoughtful comments. You can see in these 2 comments the split between the consequence between parent pickup versus student retrieval, so a little diversity of opinion on this. Prior to the implementation of the policy, I think it's important to mention that many conversations were had about progressive discipline, the secure yonder bags, student versus parent retrieval, and so on. But what isn't captured necessarily in the comments is the anecdotal conversations outside of the survey. So more students, especially in grades 5 and 6, are revealing in conversations that they're choosing not to bring their devices to school at all. That goes back to that culture establishment on slide 3 I mentioned. I think it's starting to happen. You can go to staff feedback. All right, so this is a group that in my mind deserves a great deal of thanks. 109 staff were able to take some time to respond to the survey. A little under 12% of the staff were left unsure about minimizing distractions. So when you dive into who those staff are, that's your primary, right? When you look at the staff on the chart on the right, there were no staff member that indicated any negative impact on student focus or learning in the classroom. You go ahead and go to the next slide. Key point on this chart on the left is that from a teacher's perspective, again, removing the devices has done no harm on the social front, and the vast majority of unsures in the chart, again, were from the lower elementary. Right, you can go into the staff feedback. I have a few comments here for you. Again, I try to find a little bit of diversity of perspective on some of these comments, but overall the feedback was very positive from the staff, with some challenges articulated in enforcement and a few suggestions for improvement around Chromebooks and communication with parents. The general sentiment is that the policy has improved student focus and interactions while easing distractions caused by personal devices. Next slide. So Dr. Adley already mentioned the Max Dossel presentation. That's next week. The students at the high school and the middle school will see Max during the day, and the parent presentations in the evening. Look for signups if you haven't seen them already. I want to thank the YWCA, Thriving Youth, the Depot, OK to Delay, the Town of Darien, and the middle school and high school parent associations who have all collaborated together to make Max happen. And if I've gone too quickly over some of the guidance tonight, you can find a lot more details on the technology webpage from the district site. All right, you can go to the next slide. Thank you. All right, so here we are. The implementation of the new guidelines is working for the staff and families. The work is hard, especially this first year. So we believe the challenge is in sustaining the current practice. Lots of valuable feedback was collected in the surveys. Keeping in mind the high satisfaction and effectiveness articulated by parents and staff, we feel this is working. So at this point, we are recommending continuing the current plan as is for the remainder of the school year and reevaluating in the spring. Family, staff, and students can expect a similar survey. I'm anticipating sometime early April, so that we have time to administer and propose adjustments if necessary. Comments from some students expressed confusion about the need for this change. Students have been and continue to be our partners in this work, and they've been presented with information on this about the reason for a change, but I think they need a little more help with the why, at least some of them do. So I think we can get them there. I want to close with a round of thanks to everybody, including the families and the staff especially. And so I'll do my best that I can to try to address any questions or concerns or thoughts you may have.
Could I just ask you to add in just one anecdotal story?
Oh, did you
We
want
have
me to
to-
tell this story about?
Yeah,
Oh,
but-
I know the one you're talking about.
I've asked you 5
You
times
told me
just
to
to share
make
it,
it
but
go
okay.
faster, so I went to go faster. All right, so roughly October 4th. Did any of you have your devices on you on October 4th? You might remember that around the middle of the afternoon, the cell phones were going off on any adult that had a cell phone on them. Thanks to FEMA and the FCC, they were doing a test. This was the great unplanned assessment of our practice. So let's take a moment. For that afternoon, how many devices do you think were confiscated at the middle school during that time frame as a result of that sound off? Take a guess. It's the interactive portion. Like, what do you think? 20, 30, 50?
6.
7, 6, 0. Not a single device was confiscated in the middle school. They didn't sound off in the classrooms. No devices were collected. I think that's so, while it was annoying when it's going off in my office, I just want to thank the FCC for that. All right.
That's
So-
fun. Thank you, Tim,
Yeah.
for sharing that story.
Got it.
Okay, with that, I'll open it up to board questions. Okay, Sarah.
Just a quick, those children that may use smart devices for whether it's diabetes readouts or whatever,
Yes.
how does that work? And
So,
are they allowed to do that?
Yeah, if a student, has a device for a medical purpose, that will be identified in their plan, their 504 plan, and the staff that work with that student will be advised of that, and that will be an exception.
Perfect.
And certainly it will be, generally out of sight. They could still have it in
Yes.
their pocket, but yes, it's identified in the medical plan for the child.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Robin?
Thank you. That's right. Thank you for this. I did have a question just about the Darien High School kind of piece. I know we'll get more information on that in January, but you mentioned there are 17 participants.
Sure.
How were they chosen? I'm assuming it also includes students.
Does. We have 5 student members.
Okay. And then were the students, I know the parents completed a survey, were the students also surveyed for that?
Yes, so a survey, though not represented here this evening, a survey was conducted of a separate survey from the one I presented tonight was conducted of the high school staff, students, and one was sent out for families as well. about that topic at the high school. And yes, 17 participants. We have members of the administrative team, teachers, their parent volunteers, and 5 students. Ellen helped me corral the students and the teachers on that front. So thanks to Ellen for that work.
Dennis?
In the teacher comments, there's this feedback of there are certain circumstances where mobile device can be useful in the classroom for specific project purposes.
Sure.
Do you know exactly what they're talking about or have
Well,
any examples?
So what I pulled for you was try to give you a little diversity of opinion, and I can tell you that there are staff. I've had conversations even with staff at the high school and some of the middle school that things such as a student capturing a piece of their art or using their cell phone as a piece of art on it as a reference is a common one that comes up. So you could use your Chromebook to have a representative piece of art, but to capture your own artwork, that's a challenge to do. One of the challenges we've had at the middle school that I didn't address in presentation night is the students did a lot of video work, right? And so it was handy when they had their cell phone because that has a great video camera on it. So one of the challenges I've actually been working with the librarian, we recently ordered kind of some old, I almost call them old school. They're really not old, but they're brand new, but some camcorders so that we can kind of return to doing some of that video work in the classroom. So it was things like capturing their own work and doing work with video that were probably, I'd say, the mostly impacted.
Okay. Other board questions? Dennis?
Another, you mentioned about smart time with the Apple Watch.
Yes.
But that's individual putting it on their own watch. Is there a way for the district to do a smart time Apple Watch?
No.
Thank you.
Greg has his hand up.
Greg? Thank you, sir.
Thanks for the helpful presentation. It looks like things are going well. Just a question, is there any update on the status for the high school and the rollout as it relates to the high school?
So I can tell you the high school, we've had 3 meetings. We have another one in a week. We have a scheduled meetings in which we are trying to follow process. In fact, our last meeting was just a few days ago. We went over some of that survey data. The challenge now is to wrap our heads around what's the best step forward. I'm hesitant to make a prediction about what that would look like at the moment, but I can tell you it's definitely in process.
Other questions? Okay, with that, thank you, Tim,
right,
for
thank
the comprehensive presentation. We
Okay,
appreciate
welcome.
looking at it from different angles.
All right. Thanks so much.
Okay. Moving on to the update on the NEASC accreditation visit. Ms. Dunn.
Good evening, everyone. I'm very pleased to be able to share that after a 3-year process, we have completed our NEASC Decennial visit, and happy to give you a quick summary tonight of what that has entailed. You're going to click for me?
Yes.
So we talk a lot about NEASC, but it is actually the New England Association of Schools and Colleges, and it's one of the oldest, I think the oldest of our accrediting bodies in the country. And we essentially go through a cycle every 10 years of accreditation. This last one was a little bit longer, postponed by COVID. So our last accreditation visit was actually in 2012. So the accrediting body undertakes a reaccreditation process with all schools in their governing commission, and the commission also revises their own accreditation process to keep up with changes in education. And so that process changed before this last visit, and we were actually one of the first schools to go through the new process. They set forth standards for accreditation, and the process begins with, if we can hit the next slide, our preparation of the vision of the graduate, which the board and community has been involved in. The next slide, the vision of the graduate process began actually as we literally shut down in March of 2020. And the adoption of the vision of the graduate for the district occurred at the end of 2021. Okay, so the new process really involves two different visits. The first visit is the collaborative conference, and the second visit just occurred last month, the decennial visit. And so one of the wonderful things about the NEASC accreditation process is that it's really a very faculty-driven process. And so there is a self-reflection committee made entirely of faculty. They do the evaluation of the school in reference to the standards set forth by NEASC. And so there's a steering committee that involved actually Mr. Moulis and myself and Jen Record, who was a wonderful teacher leader of our group. That process took place all the way through 2022. In October, the collaborative conference took place. A group of 5 educators came to the school, evaluated our self-report, and then set forth 2 things for us, essentially the commendations from that visit and then areas of growth. So I won't go through the commendations. These are things that I think you might imagine we would hear from our partnership with our visiting schools. Great strengths of not only the high school, but the whole district. And so moving on from there, we also identified with the team 4 areas for continued growth. The first is essentially maintaining our focus on mental health and having an inclusive and welcoming environment. Number 2, revising our curriculum in a common format that has been ongoing work with our department chairs. Expanding collaborative time for our teachers to do the important work of writing curriculum, planning together, designing assessments, and then finally, designing common assessments that reflect our values that we've set forth. From there, we had about 1.5 years to provide evidence to the visiting team last month that we have shown growth in all 4 of these areas. The team, the entire school participated in that. So we had our steering committee, but the faculty was obviously highly involved in selecting work and students to present their work, show the very best of the work we do. And the administrative team in central office, all involved in providing evidence to the team of the work that we do and the growth that has taken place in that time. And so we highlighted for the visiting team as they arrived these really important areas that we were certain they would find when visiting DHS. Important relationships between students and adults, the content expertise of our amazing teachers, students who are fully engaged in learning, demonstrating the things that we value, curiosity, communication, the high expectations we set, the trusted relationship between teachers and students, the independence that we are happy to provide them with at Darien High School. And students that really take ownership and value learning. We knew when they were visiting our classrooms, these were things that they would highlight for us. And so the visit itself, the second visit also was over 3 days. There were special meetings on each of the priority areas. Classrooms, over 100 classroom visits took place in those 3 days. And that's really the crux of what it's easy to create a report that says things about what we celebrate in the school, but it's being in the classrooms to see that it's actually happening that's most important. So there were student meetings, student panel presentations, students presenting exemplars of their own work. The district leadership team met. with the visitors, building administration, our department chairs, and they debriefed with me each day. They also had a visit to Fitch, was very important. And so the next step of the process, at some point in the near future, I'll get a draft of the report from the decennial visit. And then it will ultimately be presented to the commission. It will include, again, recommendations, commendations, and we will begin the accreditation process again. They may ask us for a report at some time between now and 2034, when the next decennial visit takes place. I think I can guarantee that our accreditation will be confirmed and continued. And that will likely happen at the March meeting. And so we will receive that report and be able to share the outcome with you at that point.
Thank you very much. I'll open it to board questions. Seeing none, I would belabor it, but we have a lot to do tonight. So thank you, Ellen.
Thank
Appreciate your
you.
time.
Just as she transitions, just want to thank both of them, Kate and Ellen, and also that's a Jan record. It's just the amount of work they've done, the preparation they've done, it's just tremendous quality work. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. Okay. Discussion and, don't go far. Discussion and possible action on proposed new courses for Darien High School for the 2025-2026 school year. Dr. Fedigan and Mrs. Dunn.
Thank you, Ms. McCammon. So tonight we'll be discussing 3 courses that were previously presented at the curriculum committee meeting on November 4th, as Ms. Parent mentioned. We have a proposed course for ASL 3, which is a continued trajectory of the ASL programming that was started some years ago. We have a course in the tech department for cybersecurity, and then we have another in the science department for astronomy. So Mrs. Dunn, I'm sure, will provide some more details about those courses and also the process that the DHS team, Curriculum Council, completes to get the proposed courses to the board table.
Yeah, I guess in fact, to make a connection between one presentation and the next, the NEASC committee, I've had the pleasure of being on 4 NEASC accreditation visits at Darien High School over my career. And so in one of the original ones that I participated in, there was a recommendation for teachers to be more involved in the development of new courses. And the development of Curriculum Council occurred at that time, probably about 25 years ago. It's a really important group of teacher leaders, and they work with their department leaders to develop courses to bring forward to this curriculum council. And that whole team, representative of every department in the building, reflects, provides advice, puts courses through the process of the why, when, how will it impact your own department, how will it impact other parts of the school. And so by the time it gets through that process, it really has been well vetted by that group of very dedicated teachers who work on that committee each year. Then it goes to the departmental council, which is the leadership team at the high school, and eventually to Dr. Adley and Amy to discuss how it plays out in terms of moving courses forward. So we are here tonight. I think we have online our leaders in each one of the departments. I'll let them give you the details about each course. But we have astronomy, cybersecurity, and the continuation of the ASL program. So I think Mr. Dockham is there to talk a little bit about the exciting opportunity to study astronomy.
Yes, good evening. So the astronomy elective is a focus for our grade 11 and 12 students. So right now we have 4 half-year electives, and those 4 electives are all focused on the life science standards. This would be a elective that would focus on both earth and space science standards, as well as some physical science standards. So this would be a new course that would allow our students access to some of those standards. It is a STEM election or elective graduation credit. It would be a half year. And this, along with the anatomy and physiology class that we introduced and implemented this year, were really the two highest interest courses that we had when we polled our students about 2 years ago when we started the process of making these proposals for both of those two classes. So I'm happy to elaborate anything else in terms of the astronomy class or answer any other questions.
Okay, we'll start with astronomy. Any questions on that? These are on for approval tonight, just FYI. Dennis.
So just a quick question. No telescope needed for astronomy?
So that was a question in the curriculum council or the curriculum meeting as well. We do have some equipment that can be repurposed from our earth science class and utilized within the astronomy class. So we do have some materials that we can use starting off. And certainly we would be looking at what kind of improvements that we can make on those materials as we continue to build the course in the future.
Robin.
And I wanted to also ask if you could just apprise the full board in the curriculum committee. We had asked about the field trip opportunities, and I think you had some interesting ideas for that as well that they might find of interest.
Yeah, so I think one of the basic ideas is to be able to utilize some outside time for observation. So whether that's early in the morning or later at night to make some observations of the night sky. We also, as part of our telescope, we do have some filters for the students to do daylight observations. So those would be sun filters that could be utilized. And I think there's also been some conversations around the use of the planetarium at a neighboring high school. In a former life, I was able to learn how to use that planetarium in New Canaan, and certainly would be an opportunity to do some cross-curricular work with some of our neighboring schools.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think.
Mr. Webster, are you there, Mr. Webster?
I'm here. Hi, everyone.
Thank you.
All right. We are excited to propose adding American Sign Language Level 3 at DHS, enabling students to further pursue their language studies. ASL continues to generate strong interest among students who are enthusiastic about this unique language program. This addition will not affect FTE because it just adjusts the student enrollment within existing language options. And as you can see, just like ASL 1 and 2, it's a full year course. And then next year, we plan to propose ASL Level 4, allowing students to complete a full 4-year sequence in the language, which mirrors our other 4 language offerings at DHS.
Any questions on this one? No? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Webster.
Thank you.
Mr. Darren, you're up. Are you there?
I am.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. So appreciate you having me on this evening to talk about the cybersecurity course. So this is a course that we're looking to add to our computer science pathway. There's definitely a career need for the cybersecurity course. According to Forbes.com, a recent study in the past year or two shows about 4 million available jobs in cybersecurity, and they expect that to increase by about 30% over the next 10 years. So the students that were surveyed here, there's definitely an interest for students that want to take this course. I think we had about, of the classes that we surveyed, there was about 60 students that said they would definitely take this course if it were offered. It is a half-year course. It's actually an additional half-year course. The other half-year course that we have is a computer science course. So this helps to complement that to give students a full year of computer science. And this will actually replace one of our computer animation courses. It just ties in a little bit better with our computer science pathways that we have for some of our AP computer science courses and the computer science course itself. It will be a STEM graduation requirement, and it will help prepare students not only for maybe a career in cybersecurity, but any computer science higher education program will have components of cybersecurity, so it would better prepare them for that. And happy to answer any questions you may have.
Greg, I'm noticing in the notes that you say you have more than 120, you've grown, your program's grown by more than 127 years. I can't speak, more than 127 students in the past 5 years. Can you speak to that briefly?
Yeah, so with some of the new courses that we offered, I think DIY was one of the big ones that has grown over the past, I'd say 5 or so years. We had, I'd say 4 sections last year, and then I think 6 sections this year. In addition to that, the AP Computer Science Principles course has grown. We've seen a little bit of a tick in the personal finance courses. So we're seeing definitely a growth in a little bit in business, definitely in computer science, and even in our tech ed courses. So we've been able to fulfill some of that FTE with moving some of the teachers around. We have one of the art teachers teaching a couple of our courses. He's actually now certified in tech ed, so he's teaching some of our courses this year. And we have another teacher who is computer science certified who taught Mandarin last year that picked up one of our computer science courses this year. So we're hoping to kind of keep that staffing in our department to help support some of these new courses as well.
Thank you. Other board questions? That's exciting to hear.
Jill.
Okay. Yes.
I'll just point out that the curriculum committee was in support of moving these forward. And I do think I want to point to the last bullet on the slide that this cybersecurity course replaces an additional course. And I know I've received some feedback from community members, just that we're cognizant of when we add. We need to make sure that we're making sure that we're adding, not for the sake of just adding, but making sure that we're doing things intentionally and making sure that we're continuously looking at what we have and what is not working, what is not filling. And I know that we do that, but just so we keep that top of mind.
Thank you for the comment. Okay, anyone else? No, okay. With that, may I have a motion to approve the proposed new courses for Darien High School for the 2025-2026 school year as presented? That's Dave, seconded by Dennis. All those in favor? And Greg I see Greg. Katie, I can't see you. In favor, thank you. Okay, thank you very much. So that's unanimous. Okay, thank you all for being here this evening. All right, with that, we'll turn it to further discussion on the middle school schedule. Ms. DeMollis.
Good evening.
So just before Kate gets started, just want to thank them for all the work they've done between the last time we were here. And this just gives a wee update on some of the questions the board members have had and also sort of focuses the work for next year. Thank you, Kate.
Of course, thank you. In advance of tonight's meeting, in addition to sharing these slides, we shared a memo that answered some of the questions that were raised in our last conversation. So I do want to highlight a few of the points from that memo. One of those questions was about the distribution of classes sections at 25 across grade levels. So we disaggregated those 3 grades by class, by subject, and looked at where are the classes of 25 and also how are our rainbow students distributed across those grades. And in both cases, we found that the larger sections were not a function of the number of teams at each grade level, which I know was a concern expressed by some members last time. The memo also includes the requested information for class size distribution summary for special education classes, as well as goals for our upcoming year's scheduling and our overview of the timeline that we planned to follow this year, both of which we'll elaborate on in the slides, and a spreadsheet of all of the scheduled course sections with their enrollment and the number of students who are off team or rainbow in those sections. During my short time as principal so far at Middlesex Middle School, I have taken seriously the needs to examine both the process and the timeline of building the master schedule for our school and for loading students into that master schedule for this year. I've spoken with trainers at Aspen recently to ensure that our administrative team will be participating in high leverage professional development throughout our build process this year. And I've collaborated with my department chair colleagues and central service administrators to establish a clear plan for this year's work. We've also engaged in 2 important post hoc exercises with our master schedule. The first process sought to answer the question, could the administration and counselors have made changes to student schedules that would have resulted in Middlesex starting the school year with no English, social studies, math, or science classes at 25? And the answer is yes. Secondly, we sought to answer the question, were there steps that could have been taken in the build that would have alleviated the number of classes at 25? And in undertaking that section of rebuilding the schedule, I identified changes that I believe would have had a positive outcome on the student load process. So it's worth noting that to prioritize class sizes, other factors will need to be given less priority or flexibility, such as social requests made by families or requests to change courses for music, language, or math after the master schedule has been set. But it's important for us to emphasize that I do believe that we could have achieved that outcome if different steps had been taken. And so I share that as a framework as we head into our next slide, which is our goals for the coming year. So as you know from our last presentation, this year, as at the time of our October 22nd board meeting, we had 24 sections in English, math, science, and social studies that were running at 25 students. Our plan is to start next year with no more than 5 classes in those disciplines at 25. We went with 5 because in looking at historical data since 2018, that is the most number of sections at 25 that the school has run. So that is our target, to be consistent with that practice, if not lower. We're also looking at the rainbow sections and students who are off team. I would delineate classes that are rainbowed by design, meaning those classes that are discipline subjects that are typically on a team. But for those particular courses, we choose not to assign them to a team. For example, double accelerated math classes, where they are intentionally rainbow. So when we think about all the other times that students are rainbow, our goal is to reduce down to 100 or fewer times that happens next year, which would amount to about a 50% reduction, similar with previous year data. And then third action step is to address PLC time. So while at our last conversation, we provided many steps that we plan to take in the coming years, these are the top 3 priorities and areas of focus for the next several months of work. This slide provides a little bit more information on that off-team designation, and I apologize, I recognize the inconsistency in the language at the top there. 424 times students are off-team or rainbow, or instances of. So as you can see, about half, 205 of those instances are in those rainbow by design classes, our double accelerated math classes or comprehensive math classes. The other 219 times a student is off team or in a rainbow class where they're not designed to be that way as a section for English, social studies, science, and math sections that are assigned to a team. As we shared last time, there are reasons that most likely contribute to those instances taking place. Those include hand scheduling of students, meeting student course requests, scheduling special education services, responding to individual student needs, and parent requests. Our intention in modifying and adapting our timeline going forward is that we should be able to reduce the number of the hand scheduling requests so that we have fewer of those instances. Next slide, please. Since we are doing so much work looking ahead before we start building the schedule this year, I did want to share with you one of the projections that I think is interesting and framing some of our thinking. And that is, if we keep all of our team teachers teaching 5 classes in their current grade level or the grade level they would be assigned to next year, these are the average class sizes we would expect based on the projected enrollment at this time. So for grade 6, with all 6th grade team teachers teaching 5 classes and 4 teams in the 6th grade, we would be starting with an average class size of 19. Whereas for grades 7 and 8, with the 3 teams of teachers all teaching 5 classes in those grades respectively, the average class size would be 23. So that is information we'll be taking into consideration as we identify the number of sections to run in each class. Specifically, These are the action steps that we are currently taking. One is to engage in scheduling with Aspen, scheduling professional development with Aspen, which will have participation both from Middlesex administration team as well as from the central services team. We have established a master build timeline, which is shared with you in the memo. We're planning to complete the course requests and the entering of the course requests into Aspen earlier so that we can inform our section counts, especially for our incoming sixth graders, which will allow us to begin the master build process specifically in April. We're planning to approach scheduling as a team with the Middlesex administration, the department chairs, and with central services oversight. We aim to communicate earlier with staff and families about schedules. So in June is our target to share with teachers what their classes will be, with our special education case managers, what their caseloads will be, and to share with families a course verification of what classes their students are in. And then we commit to providing a scheduling update to the board on June 24th. And Dr. Adley said at that time, if there was a need to consider additional FTEs, that is the point at which we would tell you, but we are confident that that's not where we're going to be.
Just for clarification for that, if you're wondering like why we put that on, we do come to the board in July for elementary anyway, right? We do it for elementary. It doesn't mean to say I wouldn't do it for middle school or high school. Actually, if I ever had a case, I both should have done it and would always do it. If I'm increasing an FTE anywhere in the district at all, I would always come back to the board if it wasn't approved through the budget to get approval through the board. So this is just a placeholder date to ensure that at that particular point, if we have the need, I don't anticipate we will, but I will not be shy about putting it on the table if that's the case.
Okay. I'll open it up to board questions. Thank you very much for the outline. Robin.
Thank you for this information. I had a couple questions, and this was really helpful just to hear the possibility of what could have actually happened. But one question is with the Rainbow course proposing a reduction of basically 50%, so you basically eliminate 100 times that would occur. My question is that really possible given the differentiation of the math, the language, the music, all of the different pieces that different students might have? And I mean, is the number that you're trying to get to kind of based on the historical norms of the number of Rainbow classes? That's one question. If you want to start with that.
Yep. So two-part answer to that. One, yes, based on the historical norm of the available data, which is last year's data, and also based on having our counselors look at all of the instances of students who are on Rainbow this year and thinking through what are the factors in their schedule that contributed to that. And for the most part, as we said last time, the need to hand schedule students was a major driver and students resulting in being off team. And there was an increased need to hand schedule students this year because we're in the nitty-gritty again, but the process of building the schedule is you build the master schedule and then you load students into it. And it can be the case that that process you spend time in, where you move classes, you open a section here, you close a section there, you try reassigning a teacher. And as you do that, you can reload and reload and reload. That part of the process was truncated. And so when it was turned over to the counselors to do the final tweaks for students, some of those changes which might have happened and might have ameliorated some of those instances of rainbows were not taken care of by the Aspen scheduler.
Okay, thank you. And the other question I had was when you say address PLC time, what do you mean by that? And why would that be necessary?
So for the past few years at Middlesex, some teachers have had their PLC during lunch, which I positive one lunch jump in, which was a surprise to me and a surprise to some members of our team here when that came to our attention. And we share the concern that teachers shouldn't be having a working lunch for PLC. So it's a priority to me to make sure that they have that time dedicated in their schedule because it is time that they need.
Thank you.
This has been a standard practice certainly since ever I've been here, it's been a standard practice for that. And the last time that this was brought up by the union president was the first time that had been put on the table as an issue, which is fine because we have to correct it.
So it didn't result from the scheduling. It was
Correct.
a legacy issue.
Correct.
Okay, but you're going to correct it. Yes.
Correct.
Bless you, Ellen.
Either way, we have to correct it.
We have to correct it. Yes, that's right. Okay. Katie.
Thank you. And to be clear, I'm not looking for an answer tonight, but I did wonder if as part of our evaluation, as part of our, sort of looking backwards to student impact and looking forwards, if we might also evaluate in broad terms, whether or not there might be differences in grades, student outcomes in, the smallest classes versus the largest classes. I think that given the focus of this topic and how it relates to board policy, that could be an interesting data point. So just tossing that out as something to look at as you guys continue your evaluation.
Thank you.
Okay.
David.
All right. Dave.
So I just had a quick comment. Katie, I really appreciate you taking ownership of this. I appreciate the analysis and the look back. I appreciate the clear goals and the KPIs and look forward to you keeping us updated on the implementation.
Thank you.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you.
Okay. Presentation and discussion on October 1st district enrollment report and projections. So we have Rich and Mr. Patrick Gallagher.
All right. Good evening, everybody. I'm Pat Gallagher, a principal with MP Planning Group. I see a lot of familiar faces, and so I'm going to go through very quickly tonight, but happy to answer any questions on any of the materials in your packet. If we could go ahead to slide 3 and start with a look back on how last year's model performed. This is always our starting point. And the model performed really well. Overall, we're within 16 students, K-12, less than 0.5% difference. And our elementary and middle school projections are trending very nicely, including the kindergarten projection for this year being within 6 students. The high school came in a little bit higher than the projected enrollment, largely due to 11th and 12th grade, where we tend to see a lot of out of district placements, as well as 18 to 22 program students. And so that's something we'll capture in our projections going forward. So moving ahead to slide 6, one of the things we've tracked over the last few years is the uptick in births, and that tends to lead to larger kindergarten classes. We saw a spike in 2021 and 2022, especially. Over the last 2 years, that has gone down a little bit, but it's still, births are still trending well above pre-pandemic levels. And so our next 5 kindergarten classes will have larger birth cohorts associated with them than you've seen over the last 10 years prior. And so that's reflected in our elementary projections going forward. The next slide shows the housing market trends. This is another area where we've seen some change from last year. We track home sales because they're typically closely correlated with in-migration into your community. We saw the increase in home sales in 2020 and 2021, which led to higher in-migration into Darien and many of your peer communities as generational turnover occurred and folks who maybe are empty nesters were selling their home to a family with children. However, over the last 3 years, we've seen home sales decrease pretty substantially. And this year, year-to-date data is on pace to be the lowest in recent memory. And so as home sales decrease, we anticipate lower in-migration into the community until that starts to normalize. So we can move ahead to slide 9, where we always do our consultation with the planning department to get an understanding of any major developments that have been approved over the last 12 months. The only new project is Sedgwick Lofts, which is an 18-unit development, all 1-bedroom units. So we're not anticipating this to have a major impact on our enrollment going forward. But some of the notable changes are some of the projects we've been tracking over the years are now either fully or partially built, and we're no longer forecasting future students coming out of them because they're already baked into the baseline number, and we have existing students in those developments. So notably, Darien Commons, which was completed last year, we now have students coming out of that development fully leased, as well as phase 1 of the Corbin District project. So those are no longer being added on top of the projections like we have in prior years. And so we are adding in fewer students from new housing than we did to prior years. And because we have some new developments with existing students in them, we were able to update what we call our local multiplier, adding additional projects into our model. So we have Avalon, the Heights at Darien, as well as Darien Commons we're using those three developments combined to anticipate future enrollment out of the remaining projects. We can slide ahead. I won't get into too much on the enrollment trends. If we can go ahead to slide 20. New to district students, we track year over year by looking at your student database and flagging student IDs that weren't in the year prior for grades 1 through 12. Again, this is a good proxy for in-migration into your community. And it shows similar trends to your home sale chart, especially if we look at the elementary level. So the years where we had our peak in home sales in 2021, we had the highest number of new to district elementary students. And as home sales have decreased over the last 3 years, our new to district students have gone down, especially at the elementary school level. And so that's being reflected in some elementary zones more than others. Holmes was the school that came in quite a bit lower than our projections. And almost all of that is due to fewer new to district students through in-migration. And that's actually, if we can go ahead to slide 22, I think that gives a good illustration of those impacts. So Holmes, really our only elementary school that came in quite a bit under the projections. Prior to the pandemic, and in those years where we saw surging home sales, they averaged about 15 to 20 new to district students. This year, they had only 4, so quite a deviation there. So looking forward, as we develop our 10-year projections, we always develop different models, high, medium, and low, reflecting different conditions. And so slide 26 shows kind of the assumptions that we use. We always recommend our median projections for long-range planning, but we recognize that in any given year, you may trend higher or lower based on conditions that we can't foresee. So we prepare a high and the low really as your planning range should we trend into more optimistic conditions, a stronger housing market, higher in-migration, or a pessimistic situation where we have lower housing turnover and lower in-migration. But for the purposes of our report, we always recommend the median projections for your planning. Moving ahead to slide 29, that shows our 3 models. And our median model is slightly trended towards the high, simply because we always, in districts that are investing in their facilities, we always like to take a little bit more of an optimistic approach, knowing that oftentimes there's a build it and they will come factor that we just can't simply mathematically model. But we know with Oxridge opening, we did see quite a big jump in enrollment for that facility. So under the medium and high models, we're showing some pretty modest but steady growth over the next decade, while the low model projects largely stable enrollment over the next decade. And over the last 5 years is really where our models become much more based on assumptions and projected births and fewer known students. And so the gap between the high, medium, and low models grows. But under the medium model, we're projecting that overall enrollment is going to increase to just under 4,800 students by 2034-35. So when we break that down by grade grouping on the next slide, we can see the differences between the different schools. At the elementary level, we're anticipating about a 6% increase over the next decade. And a lot of that growth is anticipated to occur over the next 5 years as those larger birth cohorts make their way into kindergarten. At the middle school level, we're expecting a smaller growth over that first 5 years, but then the growth picks up over the final years of the projections as those larger cohorts from elementary school start to move up to the middle school. And then the high school is projected to decline in the near term, again, largely based on some smaller cohorts moving up to 9th grade and some larger graduating cohorts. But we're anticipating that to start rebounding over the later years of the projections, averaging about 1,350 students over the last few projected years. And then the next slide shows our individual elementary school projections. We are anticipating the greatest growth at Oxridge, which has been your fastest growing school in recent years, adding about 45 students over the next 5 years. And then we're also anticipating some modest growth at Henley and Holmes, growing by 16 and 14 students respectively. Royal and Tokenique are the two schools where we're seeing a lot of those new housing units coming online over the next several years. And so Royal, we're expecting to grow by about 20 students, and Tokenique, we're expecting to grow by about 39 students. And Tokenique's where a lot of those housing units are located. So if we can skip ahead to slide 33, which is our takeaways. Every year, we just do slight revisions to the model based on new data. So this year, we're largely on the same trajectory as we were in prior years, with a slight downward revision due to lower housing turnover and lower student generation rates for future housing. And looking at next year's enrollment, we're looking at overall very stable enrollment at a just 2 student decrease, and both the elementary and school being very stable, middle school seeing a slight increase, and the high school seeing a slight decrease. Looking out over a longer horizon, we're expecting that growth in the elementary schools first, and then in the later years, that growth will trickle into the middle school, and by the last year or two of the projections into the high school. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, great. Board questions? Robin?
Just one question on the phase 2 Corbin and Norotan Heights student generation. Is that included in the current projections?
It is, yes.
It is already. Okay, all right.
So there are those develop phase 2 and the Norotan Heights are not built yet, so we're adding students from those developments into the model.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Katie?
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Alan, my question is for you. Noting that slide number 31 of the deck, where Oxbridge is expected to add 45 students over the next 5 years. Just curious about how there might be space for that, considering that this year had 2 grade levels with sections of 5.
Yeah, we'll be done probably, I think, 1 section for next year overall in the elementary schools. But Oxbridge is going to continue to be a little bit of a juggling act, and depending on 1 year versus another, where we have an enrollment for kindergarten or the other sections. Because yes, we certainly have at the moment, which is not unusual because in other areas we have this, that our world language, for instance, the world language teacher travels as opposed to going to an extra classroom at the moment. So those are things that we're going to have to continue to monitor very closely as we go through this process.
Following up on that point, given we can only build out 8 years of projections because that's what the state requires of us. And even at Oxford, there's even a little capacity and still we're busting at the seams. Is this something we could look at facilities, just comparing our actual, the enrollment projections to the actual space, just so we can understand the implications?
Well, we do that. We do that. Unless you're meaning something different, we do that during the budget process.
No, I mean, like noting that, for example, I'm really talking about the facility versus the enrollment. So if we hit this enrollment projection, then I have art on a cart or, Spanish. That's what I'm asking for. Not so much how many sections do we need, but how does the number of sections we need impact the use of the building?
We can, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, we
Yeah.
can.
Okay.
Just to add a wee bit of clarity, as actually Patrick noted, when we do long-term projections or for the state projections, we use the high end numbers. So that's what we did do for for Oxbridge and for these other projects that we're doing right now. We've used the high end numbers. We've always used the medium as recommended for actual scheduling purposes.
Okay, thank you. Are there other questions on this, Dennis?
Yeah, so this is to Alan as well. So in Kate's previous discussion, she was saying 360 prompts a new team. So in looking through this data I'm getting way ahead of myself, but in 2 years, we're going to have, in 27, 28, we're going to have two classes in middle school that are above 360.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to go back to 4 teams, 3 teams, and how will that impact? I'm getting way ahead, but I'm just trying to understand where we are.
Yeah, well, you could also go back, it's not for the purpose of the discussion tonight type of thing, but you could also go back to we've had like 3.5 teams or otherwise in the past. So it's not as if you have to go to a full 4 teams, because in the past we have had variations of, well, what we'll call like 3.5 teams.
Suffice it to say, we'll be having discussions about the impact of population fluctuations because
yes,
there's
yeah.
enough variability in the next coming years.
Jill.
Okay.
I particularly, my concern is at the middle school. I mean, I think we hear anecdotally that middle school is busting at the seams, and we're looking at what that looks like in facilities. And I think it would be important to know, this is adding, was 120 students, and what does that really mean? And let's make sure that that's factored into our facility study.
Yeah, I think that's you were touching on that. I do think we need to look at the scope of our schools and how much room we have and doing the additions at some of those elementary schools. And I don't want to bring up the R word about redistricting, but we may need to look at doing something along that, especially for elementary. But I agree, the middle school, I think, is to me the big concern.
Right.
Yeah, the middle schools, like for some time now, has been getting to the point of the scheduling, because it also impacts the schedule, because sometimes you don't even have the actual space to actually schedule this class. So that's why it is important in that study to actually do it.
Okay. Other questions on this report? Okay. This was very helpful. Thank you so much. Appreciate
Patrick,
your
thank you
time.
very much.
Thank you.
For your synthesis and work.
Okay.
Thank you, Patrick, for staying. Thank you.
Update on fiscal year 26 budget initiatives. Dr. Adley and Rich Rudolph.
Well, there's a couple of members around the table here who can just address these as we go around. So the K to 3, Amy, why don't you just talk about the updates and those?
Sure. So for K to 3 literacy, the update is projected estimated implication for budget if we were to move forward with the Into Reading program. We have a placeholder of $410,000. That is below the original projected cost based on the most recent proposal that company was able to provide for us. I do want to point out that would be for K-5 resources. That is not necessarily what we would have to do or what we would recommend. If we did move forward with that programming, we might do something like a K-3 and then a roll up to the upper grades. We have piloted with teacher feedback. I'm sorry, we've had the pilot teachers come and share feedback at the November 4th curriculum committee meeting. And we think that was very helpful. And part of our continued decision-making process will be to have those teachers come back certainly in our December meeting as well. We had professional learning with HMH reps. I attended that myself on November 5th with the staff. And following that, we had grade level collaboration sessions. And one to the next teacher commented on that's really what they're needing, more time to collaborate with grade level partners, not just in the school, but across the district. Regardless of the resource that we use, it's really around instructional practice. And they find that that is the most useful part of their experience. So we will meet again as a curriculum committee, I believe, on December 2nd. And so we'll be providing another update then. I mean, what will have happened in that month's time. Okay. All right, EduPlanet, there really is no further action or no new information to report to the board. We shared in the last curriculum meeting and the last Board of Education meeting that update with the projected costs, including not only expansion of the EduPlanet software program, but also a minor amount of money for professional learning related to not only UBD, but also Universal Design for Learning. And that is something that I would highly recommend as we're having every curriculum project include members of our SCSS team. The play-based learning, I facilitated a professional learning session for our staff on November 5th on play-based learning. And we have taken care of it. You'll hear more about this in our next board meeting when we give an update on the strategic plan. We've started to develop a shared understanding of what we mean by play-based learning based on the legislation and vocabulary that's included in that new legislative requirement. And we have a curriculum writing team that is meeting now who will be writing scenarios, which is a part of elementary pre-K curriculum that will be shared with our staff in January for the January professional learning so that they can implement in the spring. So we're very excited about that. We've also completed a needs assessment for the ELP and the kindergarten classrooms with regard to resources like blocks, kitchen, and other items that those classrooms might need to make sure that there's parity across ELP and kindergarten. And then with the last for teaching and learning with regard to PLC, there's no new information. It's ongoing. We'll continue to be discussing with our administrative team and also PDEC, which is our Professional Development Evaluation Committee, what would really be the purpose, design, and intent of expanding, I want to say not just PLC, but really professional learning time. PLC is one part of our professional learning that we could really protect that time if we had more professional learning time for our staff. And so we'll be providing information to the board around what local area school districts offer for PLC time, as well as an analysis of our current use of PL time in the district.
And that's December?
Yes. And that's it for facilities is next.
Well, the facility study, we recommended it. We've talked about it this evening. If there's any other progress, I think we're at this.
So the facility committee recommended putting it forward in the superintendent's proposed budget. So it'll be reflected in RC 12, and then during the budget deliberation, the board can decide whether or not they want to move forward. There was a recommendation to include central office in the study as well.
The website design, the technology department. I didn't overlook you, Shirley, did I? Oh, it's next, sorry.
Website, but
Sorry.
you're welcome to.
Yeah, right. Yeah, you're right about that.
Transition.
The technology department, we'll be putting together a focus group that will include staff members, but also we'll be looking at some community members to provide specific feedback on that. You see the board docs in there, which addresses something that came up through the board of sort of user friendliness, access to documents in the past, and so on and so forth. So that's in there, and my assistant is looking at that. But so that's ongoing. That's just basically where we are. We're just literally just reaching out to the parents to put that group together.
And next is transition program. We had a chance in a prior meeting to speak a little bit about our process. We are estimating to be part of R24. There are 5 students who will be eligible for transition programs for next year. We've met with several of the families, and of that, we believe there are 3 who would have interest in coming into our Darien transition program. We did have a chance to go over to the Fitch space that we spoke about last time. And the advantage of that space, if it were possible, is that it's adjacent to Fitch. We could share staff, including the nurse, including related service providers, and also peers, and having opportunity for that. Dr. Adley, myself, and Rich and Scott had a chance to go over there. The space is lovely and may be adequate, but we're in conversation with them if it would be feasible. So at the same time, we still need to look at other spaces and not limit ourselves, although we really did love the design of that. And the proximity again to Fitch would really just support our students.
Rich, is this you?
Yeah. So the IT team, as well as Tim McGuire, have been looking at both Aspen and Power School. We did survey administrators and secretaries and some informal surveys of teaching staff about the different SIS systems. There is a desire to have more training on Aspen. As employees come from other districts who are used to Power School and come to Darien, who has Aspen, there's not a lot of understanding of how Aspen works. And so there is a request to have more training. And so we are going to recommend putting some funds in RC 15 for staff development for both administrators, secretaries, and teachers on how to better use Aspen. There's also a new mobile app that's available through Aspen that IT would be looking to implement for the following year. And then the idea would be to survey staff again in fiscal year 26 to see if that training was fruitful and whether or not there should be a decision to again look at Power School maybe for the following year.
And the 5th grade, we departmentalization, we took off as a consideration for next year. Teen Talk at the middle school, we were asked just to add that in terms of, so we focus as a priority. We're losing the grant, so we have to have the consideration of whether we fund that in the actual budget.
We're losing the grant?
Sorry. Technically, the grant is for 1 year, so there's no guarantee for next year that we will receive the grant. So even if part of the grant comes through, if the community fund wants to fund a part of the grant, we would have to agree to fund the whole thing and wait to see if those funds come through. But at this point, there was no guarantee or commitment that that would be funded on an ongoing yearly basis.
Okay,
And part of,
John.
sorry, part of the grant was also through a federal grant, right? So, which was a one-time, I can't see Rich from here.
So it was the opioid settlement fund. So a lot of municipalities received funds due to the opioid crisis. So that was one-time funds given to the town in this case, and they used a portion of those funds for Teen Talk Community School. So both that and the community fund grant end at the end of this school year. So if it's to continue in next school year, the board will either have to fund it in their budget or alternative grants will have to be found either in whole or in part.
Thank you.
Dennis.
So Shirley, with the transition program, are we going to hear more about that in December when we have our special education review?
On the November 26th, it's
Sorry.
included in the presentation, yes.
Okay. Can I just request that you could try to help us with, because 500,000 for 3 students seems like a lot to me. Can you space out how much is the startup cost versus the cost to transition to students and what else? Again, I don't want to identify students, but what are we paying out of district as well to try to build the case for there?
We'll show both what some of the actually artifacts we'll need for the program, including kitchen, different hardware and different laundry machines, all of that, so we can have that cost as well. But we'll also cost out what it would for an equivalent program out of district.
But I'm asking for what is like this, like the laundry machines and things, those are your startup costs. They're not for the
Right,
3
ongoing.
students.
So-
If we can kind of separate that out of what our startup cost is to start the program versus what it's going to cost to run the program.
So because the facility would be rented, that's typically funded by the landlord and then he incorporates that into the rent. So it's not as if you own the building and you would have a capital cost in year 1 and then not pay for it anymore. You're really going to end up paying for those startup costs
Every
throughout the
year.
life of the lease.
Okay.
So it might be that the startup costs are $250,000, but then that landlord's going to amortize that over, let's say, a 5-year lease. So if you normally would pay $100,000 for the rent, you're going to end up paying $150,000 for 5 years.
All right, thank you.
Robin.
Just to follow up to that, to Dennis's question, as part of that presentation, can you also please show the existing cost of what we're doing now, including the transportation costs for outplacements, et cetera, versus this new situation, with a rented facility and doing it in-house.
Yes.
And then also, you're saying 3 students for this coming year, but do you have a projection for the following year? How many potential students there would be?
We
as
do.
well?
We've actually looked at 4-year outlook.
Okay.
So we have done that. That said, it changes depending on families and students and
Right.
what the opportunities are. And I think last time we spoke, but we will in our presentation, some students go to programs like the RISE program with CES over at Sacred Heart. There are different students with different needs, but we've actually tried to anticipate some of that, but it does change, so it's hard to predict.
Okay, great. But just for that presentation, when we get it in more
Certainly.
detail. And then are we opening this up for other questions
Yeah.
at this point?
I think just on that topic, it's fair to say that the board's probably going to be looking at a choice to make in terms of providing in-house program for young kids at an understandable expense. It's not necessarily an efficiency.
Okay. Any other items on the list? Questions? Yes, Robin.
I had another question just about the PLC because it went up from a range of 219,000 to 516,000. What was the reason for that increase in the PLC estimated?
The new
cost?
bus contract.
Sorry?
The new bus contract. So the cost primarily is associated with buses. So what you're looking at is $158 an hour per bus. Would be the bus cost. And then this year, unlike previous years, you have the excess revenue for food services subsidized in the Board of Education's budget. So if you're having more PLC time, you have less food service sales. So for example, currently at the high school, we lose about 10 to 15% of revenue every time there's a PLC. So if you're doing it once a month, it's a certain amount, but if you're going to escalate that, let's say to once a week or something greater than once a month, and you're doing it maybe across the district or just at the high school, that subsidy is going to come down because you're going to sell less food.
Okay, but the initial information we saw over the summer was 219,000.
So that was-
Something changed.
So that was only looking at the high school.
So this would be also increased grade assumption, and that's
Correct.
the reason for the increased cost. Is that?
That's part of it.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else have questions on this?
Yeah, I just want to capture one thing that's in my head, and I don't know how we do this, but we're talking about grants and especially for like the teen talk of that. And something that's always bothered me, when we budget for positions that have grants, we just put that in as such, right? As a grant. We don't differentiate that this is a budgeted role with a grant, correct?
Rich?
We identify it.
We identify it, but I'm wondering if we could budget it differently as putting it in as a full-time FTE and then put a grant as a separate place. Because I think we get lost sometimes when we add these positions by grants, and then all of a sudden our numbers are much bigger than they were 2 years before.
I mean, we have to pay for a body. Yeah. It's not
So
rich.
Teen Talk's not an FTE. It is a contracted service. It's not an employee of the district. Things like this, we can't net it against the operating budget. So you do have to have a separate grant account for this, whether it's like the IDA grant or ARPA funds. Or when we used to get Title I money as an example, you do have to allocate that separately. You can't commingle grant funds with board funds. The Teen Talk is a little bit different because it's a community fund as opposed to like IDA, but you can't what's called supplement or supplant, I should say. So you can't supplant a board's operating expense with like a federal grant or a state grant, which is why you keep those separate.
Okay.
We have a grant report every week,
I know, but
every month.
I'm just thinking of how we, when we forecast, sometimes I think we get lost because we don't have a position that's a FTE because we're paying for it by a grant. I'm just wondering if there's a better way to do that.
We'll take, I'll talk to you and we'll figure it out.
Okay.
I just-
Yeah, we can talk offline. Okay.
Joanna.
Joanna.
I just wanted to, is the intention that we look at these programs as programs and vote on them before we go to the budget book?
That's a good question. Will be all wrapped up in part of our guidance discussion, but yes, I think we need to figure that out. We haven't done it this way exactly where we've pulled them forward. So it's a good question for the board. I think we probably do want to have some consensus here, and the best way to do that is a vote. So thank you for the question, but we need to tighten that up. Yeah.
If we are planning on voting on some of these, I don't feel like we've been given a lot of information or detail on some of them to really fully evaluate.
It's a fair point.
For
Agreed.
instance, the PLC
Which isn't coming till
initiative,
December.
we still haven't really gotten a lot of feedback about what that would be.
Yep.
Yep. So if that's the intent, I think we might want a little bit more detail on what exactly some of these are.
I think we probably can't, vote
Yeah.
until after we've gotten the detail. Yeah, I would agree with that. So that would be sometime in December at the earliest, at this rate.
I'm sorry, I know you were looking up, Mayor. Depends what order you're like, we're taking this into consideration. We're trying to do the presentations. When we do the presentations, I'll take into consideration whatever the board is saying or not saying or their viewpoint, right? Then they come back and make that presentation. So depending on what Ms. Walsh is, how the interpretation of that question is, I'm going to be bringing forward a budget with, unless the board's going to tell me before I even go in, don't even think about putting this in, right? So let's talk pragmatically about it if that's the case.
And we've done that before in certain items.
And I think it's
Right,
a
well,
lot
I'm
of
just
it's,
pointing out. that
this
it-
is what I think we
it-
need to incorporate into the guidance discussion
Yeah.
on the 26th.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. Thank you for the questions. Okay. Further review and possible action on proposed fiscal year 26.
Bill, I'm sorry, just before we move on, I had one follow-up question. Are we going to have all the presentations ahead of the 26th?
No, we're not. That's what we're just saying. So we're going to have to talk through it a little bit because we're not getting the PLC one until December. So it will not be possible for us to vote on this list of initiatives on the 26th because we won't have complete information.
So you're going to come back to us with next steps for figuring that out?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Okay. Further review and possible action on proposed fiscal year 26 budget calendar. Alan and Rich.
So there's just a couple of just dates here. If you look at March 11th, that's Tuesday. We typically have had that on Wednesday because the Board of Finance typically meets on that date. We haven't moved it as yet. If it's passed as it is, I'm nearly positive we will have to move that meeting to the next night. That's what we have done in the past, to the Wednesday evening, March 12th. But I note that there.
Yeah, I think we should go ahead and move it.
Yeah.
So it should be March 12th, Wednesday.
In the past, we've had a question about Thursday, December 19th. This is what happened last year. So I look at the last description there. Superintendent's proposed budget is published on the website. So the board usually gets their budget on that particular day, right? And typically, right? People get their budget books the same day as the superintendent actually does the presentation. We have done it before Christmas here, but it's got to the point that really got confusion from one year to the next year. People wanting their budget books early. It's not advisable to do that for a number of reasons, right? I can get into them if you want to. It's not my recommendation to do that. We have no obligation to put this on the website. We did last year. There is no legal obligation to do that. The board will get their budget book as long as you're not talking about it over Christmas, right? That doesn't constitute a meeting and a misuse of those documents. But I don't see why we need to put this on before the holiday period. If someone were to say, I would like a copy of that, well, they have the right to have the copy of it, and we would get it to them digitally if that's the case. I mean, that's the honest answer to that question. But putting it out there ahead of time, it's not a recommended practice. I don't recommend it. I'll just say now, look, if we had to make some difficult choices with staff members, I wouldn't have even told them before the holiday period. So those are some of the reasons. So I would recommend take it off, to be honest with you. That would be my recommendation.
Does anybody disagree with that? No. So let's remove it from the budget calendar.
Those at the moment are the only issues I'm aware of.
Just changing the 12th, the budgetary guidance from the 12th to the 26th of November.
Okay. Yes, okay, thank you.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yes, it's okay.
I just, as a point of clarification, I don't believe you posted it online last year when you got the budget, when the board got the books. I believe it took when we came back to school.
We did post it online on the 21st. December 21st.
Well, anyway, we're not going to this year. Okay, this is on for action. It would be as amended. If we're ready to go, may I have a motion to approve the proposed fiscal year 26 budget calendar as amended? That's John, seconded by Sarah. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you all. Okay. Discussion on the board member handbook, Katie Lublin.
Thank you. As came out of a previous meeting, there had been discussion at the board table about the creation, which is really more of a compilation of a resource for board members to be used as a handbook. So I had taken the first draft at creating this document, and it really is to be an easy resource for board members and a reference to help clarify expectations and protocols. Jill and I met to go over the draft, and we had talked about the idea of having potentially both a digital and a print version. The digital version being slightly more comprehensive and including active links to all of the policies, whereas the print version would eliminate some of those things that weren't able to be actively resourced that way. Some of the resources that were consulted in the compilation of this document included the Vernon District Board Handbook. Thank you to Dr. Adley and his colleague in sharing that material for us. Additionally, there were some materials used from the Cave and Cap School Government Statement. I did try to note most of the sources in here, and I'm happy to answer any questions. For today, really what Jill and I were hoping could happen from the board was really just a very high level commentary, understanding that this is a draft, sort of big picture, initial impressions, thoughts on that. Certainly recognizing that there's more work to be done. There are a few highlights in here that need to be addressed. Things that are in yellow are still to be developed. Things that are in blue were written by me. I think that it's really important to note anything that has not been specifically approved by the board. So it is called out things that are not specific to Darien. Certainly, this is an important document for all of us to be on the same page with and for there to be agreement and approval for. Green things list some of the sources. And there's a note in here as well that there's a few inconsistencies that definitely need to be rectified in terms of, just uniformity of saying board versus BOE, some of those small things. So certainly not looking for wordsmithing today, but really just kind of a high level impression of what might be helpful. A couple other next steps just to keep in mind would be a collaboration process. Jill and I were hoping that should the board, today agree that this is worthwhile and want to move forward, that we would be able to hopefully sit down and meet with Marge from a standpoint of, the policies, the comprehensiveness, and also reviewing the newly written language. Additionally, we were hoping that the cabinet might weigh in to help us build out some of the glossary and acronyms. You'll see that it's quite short. It's not comprehensive at the moment. And then, Jill, one thing that I don't think that you and I had completely ironed out, so I welcome your input, is how we want to take board feedback beyond any comments today. So if you don't mind directing the board how you'd like to receive that, that would be great.
Okay, thank you. Yes, well, so first of all, Katie, thank you for all of this work. It's extensive, and your time is greatly appreciated. Joanna, hopefully you'll be an active commentator as well as the primary recipient of it. So I think, yes, as Katie said, for tonight, we're looking for just some high level comments. I think one of the things that the board needs to decide is one of the elements that Katie has in here is sort of legal responsibility and reporting of concerns. Marge, we would recommend that probably be developed with you and Shipman and Goodwin. And so the board would need to authorize that work happen. So that's another next step for tonight. I would say, again, to avoid the board sitting here and working on the document. If there's anything high level directional you want to point out today, otherwise, I think send an email to Katie. Maybe just put me in copy so there's another pair of eyes. And we can see potentially another version when it's ready, and then maybe have a chance to vote on it. So I would say there's probably one more review just to take a look at it, and then we can adopt it. But for the moment, other than tremendous thanks to Katie, if there's anything high level people would like to offer. And subsequent to that, I'll take an answer from the board of whether or not to answer that legal responsibility reporting of concerns, whether or not to support that effort specifically. Okay, any high levels? Sarah.
I will echo the thank you to Katie. This was a decent amount of work, and I appreciate your time and your effort into putting it together. And I think it's something that, we've talked for years that this is something that we should have, and no one's really taken the jump. So thank you for that. I guess high level and moving forward, is it worth doing a working group in some way to try to, I don't know if Kate, I mean, I don't know how Katie, if it's too much, would it be helpful to have another couple of people working with you, or is it easier to just put it together with feedback, and then moving forward that way?
Katie, I'm going to go ahead.
Sure. Thank you. So really, most of this is policy. So most of this, you'll see that there's very little that's highlighted in blue that I wrote. And what is written is really more by way of introduction into certain things. So for the most part, this is a compilation of our policy, and it has a bit of a guideline to it. So I would say that because it is largely approved by the board already, I don't think that there's really a need to go through it finally in that way. I think that the plan that Jill really outlined is probably best in terms of if everyone can kind of individually look to make sure that there's not something missing. And Jill, thank you for pointing out. I definitely agree. I would love to hear Joanna's perspective. We have a couple other members that are relatively new. Anyone that kind of has a thing like, oh, it took me a while before I knew this, or I've always wondered explicitly what the protocol is on that. Those are definitely things that would be great to have, either mentioned tonight or emailed to Jill and myself for inclusion.
Okay. Sarah, and then Robin.
Just look at as I have Ryan in my sights here. Is there an opportunity to maybe, I don't know what the student representatives get. And I don't know if there's a need for that, but they're in here in policy, but I don't know if there's anything that is given to the students at all.
We do have
Perfect. I haven't seen it. That's great.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
And I did receive a copy of it. And Jill and I discussed that as well about, whether or not this should be just a standalone, and if it should incorporate everything, if the students should have something different. There are some different considerations for the students, certainly in terms of, they're not expected to attend every single meeting. We certainly encourage them to leave when the meetings get late, some of those types of things. So I think that, that is another area where it would be great if the members can look at and respond to if you have a feeling. And Ryan, for you, and Swaha, I'm sorry, for you and Brenna as well. We'd appreciate your feedback on if you think, it's helpful or if it's overkill.
for sure.
Robin.
Thank you, Katie. I think this is really helpful. And the only thing I would add had to do more with the legal piece, because I think it was really helpful. And when we had our onboarding, Greg and I with the lawyer, and he gave us some scenarios and there were printouts. And I don't know if some of that work is already put together by him that we could kind of include in this. But obviously it helps to have the onboarding happening in person where he can answer questions in real time about some of those kinds of issues. But I think that piece is tricky and it's very nuanced. And so something like that in here maybe would be a good thing as well to include.
Yeah,
I think this is helpful.
I'm in agreement that some high level sort of legal guidance is appropriate. I think I love Tom's scenarios. You can probably keep those in person. But I think a very high level summary for this. Go ahead, Dave. Yeah.
He can't bill us if he's not in person.
Dennis.
I'd just like to thank Katie for this yeoman's work. It's a lot of work and it's really great. And if I can nitpick, the one thing that I miss when I go through this, at least I didn't see it, is just something along the lines that although we are 9 individuals, that we speak as one voice when votes are taken. It's just, no?
Once votes are taken. Yeah.
I didn't see that. So, okay, my apologies.
No, it's all good.
No.
Joanna?
As the new member, I did find this extremely helpful, particularly the Roberts Rules and Parliamentary, procedures.
Great.
It's not something you find in your everyday life.
Yep.
So thank you.
Fortunately, probably. Yeah. Thanks for the comment. Okay. So with that, I will just take a vote on authorizing the work to move forward with the lawyers. So Dave will approve that Point of, yes, information.
Or do we put a cap on this or number or estimate?
That's a good question.
Thank you.
Yes. What do you recommend, Dave, as our resident lawyer?
What Tom's billing. I'm not sure what Tom's billing these days. I mean, what do we think? A couple grand goes at this? Is this a
Marge
10 grand
and
question?
Rich, can you give us a ballpark?
It would maybe be helpful to know the scope of the work that you're looking for, just review the entire document.
No, I think we're just looking for sort of what are, if we were to say to board members, these are, a couple typical things where board members might wonder how they need to handle it. Where you might have wanted to know what your lawyer has to say. So I would imagine, kind of to the point of the scenarios, that Tom already has a few high level things. It's just a function of getting that turned into some high level language. So Rich, what do you think?
I believe Tom's hourly rate is $4.75.
Can somebody cheaper help us with it?
I would like to think you would consider this one for the board.
Okay.
Jeffrey.
Okay. Okay.
Do we have to put a
Three.
number?
3. Put a cap of
Pick
around
it out of the air.
3,000.
Yeah.
Okay, so up to $3,000 approximately.
Hopefully.
Yeah, up to. So may I have a motion to approve developing the legal section of this board member handbook with up to $3,000 in legal consultation fees? Dave moves, Dennis seconds. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you. Okay. All right. We're all good on next steps. Otherwise, we will follow up with Katie and myself and copy. Thank you very much, everyone. And thank you, Katie. Okay. Further discussion and possible action on the proposed revisions to Board of Education Policy 9160, filling vacancies on the board. March.
So at the last meeting, the board came to consensus on the language for paragraph 1, which Matt Ritter had decided. And so all of the versions have paragraph 1, that language, and the other language other than paragraph 4 that the board had agreed to over time. So version 1, it gives the board the broadest discretion. It doesn't say anything about political parties. It just has the limiting language in paragraph 1, which says you can fill a vacancy as long as you don't violate state statute or town charter. Version 2 adds the language that then reflects the town charter about party that somebody was enrolled in when they were elected, and it does address the issue of unaffiliated members of the Board of Ed who resign. Version 3 maintains the language that's currently in the policy, which does not deal with an unaffiliated voter, an unaffiliated board member.
Okay. Any questions? Or are we ready to? Go ahead, Dave.
I just had a comment, which is thank you for putting the presentation together in this format. It was very, very helpful. So I appreciate the extra work.
Maybe you want to lead us off?
Are you looking for which one we want? And then we're voting on that one, or are you looking to vote on all 3 of them?
Well, I think we really can only adopt one.
Right.
So I think we need to see if there's consensus around around one of the policies. So go ahead, Dennis.
I'll throw out version 1. I like the broadest policy.
Second.
All right. Well,
I'm not in favor of that. I prefer version 2.
I do as well.
you're for 2. All right, we have 3 for version 2.
We have a motion first.
What's that?
We have a
You
motion.
actually have a motion?
Yes.
Okay, well, it's open for discussion now,
Yeah.
so. So we have thank you, a motion to approve version 1, but we have 3 folks who are signaling their no. I just called the motion. All right. All those in favor? With a version 1? That's Dennis, McCammon, Sini, the motion fails. Okay.
Wait, Dennis.
I didn't see Greg and Katie. I heard you earlier.
Is Mr. Bradley on?
He's on.
He's on.
I didn't raise my hand for that one.
You did not raise
Thank
your hand. Okay, so version 1 fails. Okay, we have a motion to approve version 2. Joanna, seconded by Sarah. All those in favor? Joanna, Sarah, Katie, is that you?
Yes, I have my hand up. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, we can't see you or Greg. Okay, well, that motion fails. Do we have a motion to approve version 3? It's Robin. Okay, seconded by no one. That motion fails.
Change it. We're not gonna change it.
Yes, Dave.
If it would be appropriate, I would like to suggest making a motion that we return to the original prior drafted version of 160 and move forward as it was constituted with no edits.
Well, okay, that's a motion. Do we have a second to returning to the original draft?
Just
Yes,
clarifying
Robin.
question. Isn't that really version 3?
So
No.
there's some changes in terms of the change in all three presented of the use of the word "the appropriate" versus "any applicable."
Oh,
Probably not intended for mischief, but it opens the door. So I think we just go.
I'll
back.
second Dave's.
Just keep going back to the original?
Yeah.
But then we lose paragraph 1.
Yeah, that's what our lawyer suggested inputting.
Could
Can't
we,
agree, guys.
We have a second.
Well, at this point, all of these have failed. So we have the sitting version. So I mean, if we can't amend it, then we just go with what we have. Yes, Robin?
would it be possible to go back to the original, but just have the new changed paragraph 1, which is what the attorney recommended?
Right.
You can make that motion.
Hold on.
Wait a minute.
Wait, you gotta have
So
to.
wait, so I'll go back and watch the tape. That's the easiest thing to do, but
We have a second for Dave's motion to return to the original.
So you just made a good point, John, which is, do I even have to make that motion?
No.
Or if
No.
I failed, then we just
No.
default back, right?
Yes.
Great.
You rescind that motion.
Motion withdrawn.
Okay.
Okay. Well, we're going to stick with the original policy. That was amazing. Okay. Personnel report, March.
Thanks for all the work, everybody.
March.
I'm trying to think of what to say. Look, we still struggle with people who are leaving in the middle of the year. And that's all I'll say. We've been lucky enough to replace them, but it's hard to replace teachers in November.
is without identifying information, do you know why?
And people look, and so then we have to look in other districts. I mean, it's just domino. Somebody left in another district and they either made a phone call here or
There's no common thread.
no.
Okay.
It's still, I mean, it continues to be closer to home. Some of them, if you look at the job they had here and the job they're going again, is a little bit less pressure. But it's not anything really consistent.
Okay. Okay. Follow-up action items. The only one I have, well, let's see. The only one I have is a specific action item from tonight is a follow-up at facilities, really probably focusing on Oxbridge simply because it's a newer build. And again, it's the use of the building against enrollment, not so much enrollment.
And
Middle school would be part of the master plan. What's that, John?
the Katie emails suggestions.
And then, yes, thank you. People will follow up with Katie for the board member handbook. And then we voted for Marge to talk to Tom et al. Also in service of the board member handbook. Okay. Any other action items that I missed? Yes, Katie.
Sorry, thank you, Jill. Yeah, I just wanted to know if we can try to maybe use the notes section a little bit more, or I don't know if it makes sense to update things, but like the board member handbook being checked off in September doesn't quite reflect how things are going. Additionally, we still have the memo on sustainable cafeterias being completed, but that moved into facilities, and there's to be a follow-up from that meeting as well. So whether or not we move things, kind of down the list as they go, or we add notes, I just think that this is a good exercise and would hope that we can try to capture the accuracy a little more.
Yep, I think it's worth, thank you for raising the point. I think what I'd love to see is when the action changes, let's make it a new action item. So the first thing was to provide the board member. Now from this one, it would be to provide feedback on the board member handbook and to do the legal research so that it's updated. Yes. That's a good point, Katie. And so Okay.
We can talk offline with that.
Yeah, yeah,
because-
Yeah, because some of it is ending up on the agendas. Yeah. Okay, with that, I'll move to public comment.
If anyone in person or online would like to participate in public comment, please come up to the podium or use the raised hand icon and wait for the chair to recognize you. Please state your name and address for the record. You will have up to 3 minutes to comment. Please note the time with the chair. There are no raised hands.
Okay, and no one online either?
No one online.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
I
Ellen.
just wanted to recognize Simone for this is the first time she's done this like live and
All right. Thank you for that. And with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn. Okay. Dennis, seconded by Robin. All those in favor? That is unanimous. Thank you, everyone, for your time this evening.
Okay.
You're great.
I do not.
No, totally focused.